Welcome to ANSHISM, Fozia. How are you doing today? I genuinely appreciate you taking out the time to talk about such a big incident in your life that possibly changed you as a person, influenced what you do. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on your show.
I just wanted to ask, by jumping straight into it, tell me about the glasses. They look really nice,
Thank
but
you.
I am aware why you wear them, and they are related to a very tragic incident in your life.
So I wear the glasses because I have an eye condition, which was a direct result of the forced marriage in Kashmir. The pressure from that, from what I went through, it's. The only way I can describe it, it was just like the worst headache of my life. And suddenly,
what did the doctor say
it
then?
was just an unbearable pain. I'd experienced nothing like it ever, but also my eye, I suddenly couldn't see out of one eye, and it was like as if there was a cotton wool. That's the only way I can describe it. And I was told to go to A&E, and from there they had told me that, they'd asked if anything had happened. Have I hit my eye? No. Has anything happened recently that's caused me any distress? Or, has anything traumatic happened? Because they said something has happened to your eye and that it's caused a lot of pressure on the back of the eye from the brain. And it's caused an eruption. And they said at the time they would need to operate within 6 months, or I'd go blind.
Oh, God.
And of course, I explained that I did have something traumatic happen, which was a forced marriage, and I guess the pressure took its toll on me. And I mean, touch wood, I can see now they are light sensitive, but at the time, unfortunately, it wasn't done in 6 months. It was a couple of years being on the waiting list. There's a shortage in the eye bank. I never knew of that. And not many people donate eyes when they die. They'll donate other organs. Again, I never knew that. It opened a whole world up to me. And when people do donate, it's the elderly. So at the time, I was told, you've just turned 17, and
It's a very young age
to have the
issues with the
cornea
eye.
transplant.
Yeah.
Exactly. So unfortunately, at the time, it was a matter of waiting for somebody who
Has to pass away
who's going to
in
pass
order to
away.
you have a new
A
set of
young
eyes
person who would pass away and also happen to be an
donating.
eye donor.
Oh, God.
And I remember getting the call, and all I was told at the time, when I had asked about it, was that it was a man in his 30s at the time. That's all they tell you. And I guess for the donor family, maybe they would tell them it's gone to a young woman, and that's all they would know. But it's thanks to him, whoever he was, that that eye that I had the problem with, I can see through it, and I'm so grateful for that. Yeah.
That must have been life changing to go through such a major eye operation after a tragic time in your life, after a time that you didn't ever expect to happen, probably. But we will come on to that. Tell me about how is it living wearing, sunglasses all the time, because
Yeah.
the weather certainly in England, there's a lot of rain, there's a lot of not suited for
Yeah, it's
sunglasses.
I suppose I feel like it's they've become
Now
a
sort of
part of
used to
me.
used
Yeah,
to yeah.
I feel now, actually, I don't know if anybody really
Recognizes you
yeah,
without the
without
glass.
them. So I suppose it's kind of, you know, I guess it's become my thing. And yeah, it's just you just get used to it. Sometimes I forget I'm wearing them.
I used to wear them in my podcast, but then I stopped wearing them because I feel when I am discussing the topics that I
Yeah,
am, it's important to have eye contact.
yeah.
And sometimes with the glasses, there is minimal contact
Oh,
and you cannot see the
absolutely.
emotions. So I used to wear them.
It's
But talking about what happened with you when you went to Pakistan, with your family. Uh, it was something that you did not
I
expect.
travelled overseas. It was the summer of 2000. I was 16 years old, just turned 16, and I went with two of my siblings and my mum. And I was told it would be a holiday to Kashmir, and I would see my grandparents who hadn't seen me at that point for over a decade. And just reminded how they're very elderly. And yeah, I agreed to go. But pretty soon after arriving there, my uncle coerced me into marrying his son, so my first cousin, at gunpoint, threatening that if I didn't pretend that I wanted to go ahead with the marriage, that myself and my siblings, my mum, who I was with, we wouldn't be going back to the UK alive. So out of fear, I went along with it. I was married pretty much, I think it was 2 weeks later. And, when I was 16, before going to Kashmir, I was just into, I would say, what your average 16-year-old is into. I was more of a tomboy. I would watch wrestling with my brothers. It was called WWF at the time. And, I would, be reading books all the time. I loved my art. I was very, I just loved getting creative. But when I think back to it, I feel like I lived a very sheltered life, because where we lived in Nottingham, where we grew up, I'd say we were in that area at the time, pretty much the only non-white family, the only Muslim family. But my parents integrated quite well when they came over here from Kashmir. And so us growing up, when I say quite a sheltered life, in that nothing, I don't think it's not even the forced marriage aspect, the culture shock you get when I went to Kashmir. It was nothing how I imagined it would be. And it was very much like as if the whole thing was just an out of body experience.
But when that happened, what was the motive of that marriage? Like, did someone, did someone promise us children that, your parents made a promise that that marriage would happen when you grow up, or they wanted to immigrate to the UK, or what was it?
My understanding of it was the fact that this person that I was forced to marry, that he had decided that he was going to marry me, that he had seen a picture, and that also he wanted to come to the UK.
Right.
And as I say, I was only 16. I 100% believed that if I didn't go ahead with this, that we wouldn't come back to the UK.
And you were held at gunpoint.
Yeah, my uncle, he actually worked for the police force, quite high up. So yeah, I had no doubts that he would carry out this threat if I didn't go ahead with this. I knew that there was no way. It was the only way I was going to go home. My mum, my siblings, I had to go ahead with it. I remember telling my mum that I would do this and this is what I was going to do. And I remember she was saying that she was happy because this meant this was, keeping it in the family. And I was kind of thinking, why? Why would anybody believe I would actually be doing this? When I spoke to my dad, who was back in Nottingham, he actually had a heart attack.
After listening to...
Yeah, that I was going to go ahead and get married. Plan was always for me to come home. I understood was for me to come home and further education. Further my education, because my parents were always big on that.
What was life after forced marriage for you? Did he come to the UK with you then?
So my uncle had picked a place. I was told that once I go back to England, like I just thought I would be fine, but my uncle told me that he would pick a place where I was going to work, and that
In England or
yeah,
in
and that he would be keeping tabs on me, so he would know if I told anybody. So if I go home and tell anybody what's happened, he would know. I believed all of this. He said that I would work in the UK, his son would come over, and so long as I listen, everything's fine. And at first, I thought, okay, I can do this. I will do this. He will come over, and then, honestly, I thought, well, then I'll just
go separate
I'll
ways?
just I'll just I'll just disappear. I'll just go. um, but I realized pretty quickly that's not what was going to happen. I foolishly had the idea to go back to Kashmir alone when there was the immigration interview at the embassy in Islamabad.
Oh God.
In my mind, I thought, well, if I go over and tell them, the British embassy, maybe they'll help me. So I actually went back alone, thinking this is what's going to happen, that I'm going to speak to them. And literally,
And how long was it after the marriage?
The following year.
Okay.
And I remember going to this embassy, and this person that I'm married to literally walks into a room, and a few seconds later he walks out and he says he's going to the UK. And I just thought, how could they have asked anything? What, they haven't spoken to me? Oh my God. Like, I just thought, then this is, what on earth was I thinking going back? And that's the first time that it really opened my eyes to the immigration system, to what actually happens. And it's almost as if it was just, no, this isn't actually going to be okay, Fozia, and actually you need to get the hell out of there. My uncle and aunt actually had like passcodes on the phone, and when I thought I wouldn't be able to come home because it was talk of now the fact that he's got his visa, there's no need for me. And when I heard this, I thought, I need to tell my mum, I need to tell my dad, but I don't think I'm going to come home. Like, they need to get me.
And that was the first time you told your parents that you were forced into the marriage, or
no,
you told them when that happened?
After, so once I'd finally come back, because at the time there were, like I say, passwords on the phone, and I couldn't.
Was it the first time you came back from where your parents are, or was it the second time when you told?
The second time. So when I came back, and I did eventually get out of there, because I told my uncle that I was told at the airport. I lied. I said that they
ask on questions on the airport.
That when we come back to the UK together, they will be asking us questions, and I feel like that's the only. I don't know how I thought of it. It just came to my head, and it got me out of there. The plan was, I overheard my aunt and uncle say, "Well, we can just call her mum and say she ran away." And I thought, oh my God, they're actually just going to get rid of me.
The point of your forced marriage was nothing to do with you. It was sending their child into a new country.
Yeah.
And when that man who you were forcefully married to came to this country, did you have any touch with them, or how did things transpire after that?
Well, pretty much straight away, he made it clear. It was like that, like as if I was an object, like as if he owned me. And I knew then this wasn't just.
What did he make clear?
That I was his. Like, it's not, for me, it was, okay, you're here now, I'm going to go and live my life. And he said, no. You know, I'm his wife, I've married him, he owns me. And I knew that, and I thought, no, this is not okay. And literally overnight, I contacted East Midlands Immigration Services. I told them everything. I told my parents. And I told them that I've told immigration and they will be coming for this person, and I will get out of this. This is not what I want. I've never wanted this. And I actually gave them an ultimatum that they could actually support me in this, or they could support him, and of course the Muslim community, because I knew there would be backlash. I knew it, and there was. That person was arrested by East Midlands immigration, but clearly due to connections, they released him by mistake, they said. So he was lost in the UK for a bit of time. In that time, he continued to call my parents home. He had other people call them to say they need to disown their daughter. What I've done is shameful. I dishonour the family, and they can do the right thing. And they'd bring religion into it. It's nothing to do with Islam. It's nothing to do with the Muslim way of life. Far from it. But to them, it was if you support her, you cut off from from everybody else. And I know it wasn't easy for my parents to do, but I don't think I appreciated at the time how difficult it was. At the time for me, it was like if it was black and white, you support your child. But of course, there were a whole other lot of implications with that.
Fozia, talking about your journey as an individual, and I saw your story when it came to light in the media, and it was pretty inspiring that a person who comes from a community which is close knit religiously, culturally, and talking about and standing up for herself. But don't you find it concerning that the FMU, the Forced Marriage Unit, reported in 2022 49% of the cases were from Pakistan, 14% from Bangladesh, and 7% from India, and rest from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. So there's a large number of portion, and more than 50%, around 50% of them happening particularly in the region of Pakistan, and 60-70% happening in the region of the subcontinent. So of course you can see that there is a lot of cultural issues there, but people unfortunately use religion as a force as well, don't they, to sort
They
of
do, yeah. I'd say I think many people will agree that people do tend to use, especially at the minute, I feel with Islam, they tend to hide behind, I'd say, the mask of religion and say this is why we have to do this. And that's how they manipulate family members. That's how they manipulate their own children, and members of the community by saying if they don't do what they're being told to do, they'll be going against God. They're going against their religion. And no religion no religion whatsoever promotes this. And I just think it's there's a lot of inherited cultural stuff, I would say, that comes
would you say
over.
it's more related to illiteracy rather than culture? Because I know people of great culture who have great value but respect women immensely and greatly. For example, I read a report where imams in Scotland came together and signed a petition, signed something which said that as civilized society, we cannot remain silent on an issue which destroys so many lives. So, religious leaders in the United Kingdom, and even if you just simply Google it, reference to religious texts, scholars, the Holy Quran, there is nowhere that it's written that your parents or your family can force you. There is a lot of importance given to consent.
Yeah.
So
absolutely, especially, yeah, absolutely. I think that when I say with culturally what people inherit, from my experience, I feel like perhaps what's been done to others, they allow the cycle to continue, and it continues with their children, and
but
then you see it with
there's a lot of social honor involved in it. There's a lot of close knit community. You have dishonored them. You need to be disowned, and it's proper practices that are not relevant.
No.
And that shouldn't be, if your parents actually love you, they shouldn't be blackmailing you. But I would like to come back to you and your age when you got forced into that marriage. You were 16. And the numbers show 30% of the marriages are below the age of consent, below the age of 18. 30% of the reported marriages. We have to highlight that.
They're not all reported.
Are you scared or are you happy that the numbers are going down?
I would say that it's a worry if numbers are going down, because I'd say it's not a true reflection of.
Because I'll give a number to the audience listening in. Last from the reports from the forced marriage unit, it's available on the government website. In 2011, there were 1,468 cases. And when the last report was published in 2022, there were 302 cases that were reported. So I think if a person with no context and with no knowledge culturally of things going, I'm sure that you have spoken to different victims as well who have gone through the same. And what has that experience been, and how traumatized have they been? Because forced marriage isn't just about taking the religious oath, taking the civil oath, and that's about it. No, there's a lot of, they can be domestic, they can be sexual abuse. There is high evidence of mental health issues and all of those things. So, what has your experience been talking to different victims?
The one thing they all seem to have in common is that it was at such a young age. So it's before they could finish their education, before they could further their education, before they could then progress in their careers and have their own financial freedom. When they then, let's face it, they're relying on their families, or they're going to be homeless. So the pressure on them, it's it's huge, and it is rare, I would say, that to have someone who has been in a forced marriage come out of it and they have the support of their family. That that does it doesn't really happen. But having said that, after in my case, after I separated from this, it was a sham marriage, a marriage of convenience. After I got myself out of that situation, yeah, my family, we no longer had so-called relatives, people from the Muslim community coming to that house. Whilst I saw it as peaceful, not sure if my parents would agree, because it was a house that was always, for the people, and my mum would love, hosting and making big dinners and things like that. And then it's literally, your daughter's done this, as if it's something to be ashamed of. But I held my head high and I carried on. I do sometimes feel like I was and am one of the lucky ones, because it could have very easily have been done that I didn't come back to the UK. I wouldn't then be sitting here to say this. There were two occasions when I was abroad, where I was in danger, and I may not have come back.
Do you feel personally that having close knit communities is a big reason for these forced marriages that happen?
Yeah.
And do you feel personally, as someone who's British, who's been born and brought up here and has learned the British way of life, do you feel weird when people are not ready to give up certain practices despite this country giving so much to them?
Yeah, and I think it's not just the Muslim community. I feel, there's so many different communities that when they tend to, for whatever reason, whether it's for asylum, whether they relocate to the UK, who for some reason don't want to integrate. They want to just keep themselves to themselves, exactly, and they pretty much keep tabs on each other. Nobody can speak out. It's kind of like, it's.
But if I'm being honest, Fozia, maybe it's the area that I came here as a student to. I personally felt that as an individual who wanted to integrate, there was sort of a difference that I felt. So it's a mixture of both.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that there is only one part of the story. There's two sides to the story. Probably the older generations never felt accepted.
No, absolutely.
Even when they wanted to integrate. Now those communities have become so big and so strong and so powerful and contributing to the economy, in positions of power, politicians, police, education.
Yeah.
And now that they have paved a way for themselves, they don't want to reintegrate. That might be a reason, and it's quite sad.
Yeah, I think people do. They branch off, they, expand, they, really go make something of their lives. And I guess some of them don't come back to those communities. And it's, I'd say it's sad, because I do believe that, Muslims, of course, they do contribute,
Massively.
to this country, in so many ways. But I think sometimes because of the press, especially in this country, you only really hear about Islam in the media when it's negative and when it's people who are using the religion as the excuse to justify their actions. And that's when you'll hear about it. And you don't really hear about actually all the, I would say normal Muslims, your everyday Muslim, because we're just all, we're just the same. It's Islam's a way of life, and it's about peace, and it's about doing good. It's not about forcing people to marry one another. It isn't, about honor-based abuse. That isn't Islam, and unfortunately, we only tend to hear about
Islam in a negative way. I think the big problem is that people don't see people as humans. They see the religions first and all of those things. Something that bothers me greatly, but I've thought about those ideas or religious differences so much that I've stopped thinking about them. I personally also feel that even voicing your opinions on them isn't making a much of a difference on people's life. I have my ideas, I have my beliefs, and I strongly believe in seeing people as people. And I have failed to see that in several communities. Moving on, talk to us about your role at Karma Nirvana, that organization I have read about. Jaswinder, yes. She does some wonderful work. She herself, as the founder, was forced to marry at the age of 14. And she comes from a Sikh community, as her name suggests. So it would be fair to say it's not only in a particular religion or a community that happens, and it's very sad. But talk to us about your role at Karma Nirvana.
So Karma Nirvana, for your listeners that aren't aware, it's a specialist charity for victims and survivors of honor-based abuse. They support, empower, and educate women. Organizations. They have training events. One of the things they do every year is actually on the 14th of July. It's the Remembrance Day. They have a lot that they do to help women. I unfortunately wasn't aware of them when I was at school. And and a lot is changing, in terms of awareness, and especially with the work Karma Nirvana do with the forced marriage unit, and all the training programs, and there's so much good that they're doing. I know for me, if I was at school and if I had any kind of awareness around forced marriages, what to look out for, signs about the summer holidays and being, taken abroad, I feel like my life would have been so different. So I think there's many, many lives, not only where Karma Nirvana's, helping survivors.
What would your message be to someone who is in a forced marriage? Someone who might face that situation in the upcoming summer break, someone whose life has been affected by it deeply and greatly, and they have been in that situation for years, and there is no sort of hope for them to come out. What is your sort of message?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I was going to say would be to seek support, but it would be to seek support from only those whom you trust. So trusted friends, if you have them, if you're in a position where you can actually trust the person that you're, actually the person you're speaking to, can you truly trust them and tell them what's going on, or are they going to go and tell your family, and make it worse for you? You've got to think of your surroundings, think if you can tell anybody, and get that support. If you can't, I would say you need to know your rights. You need to educate yourself. Go on.
For someone who doesn't have access to all of those things, forced and possibly imprisoned in their own house
Okay.
with the person that they don't want to be, how what are the signs that one can suspect, and how can we as individuals also help them? And please,
Yeah.
after you finish the point about Karma Nirvana.
I was going to say organizations like Karma Nirvana are there so you don't have to go through this alone. I think if there is somebody, if there's somebody who can't be in contact, is there somebody who perhaps, we all have neighbours. Is there someone that you haven't seen for a while? Is there somebody who was perhaps of school age and they've left school, but you've not seen them since? You know, it could be somebody living next door to you, a young girl, and she's been forced into marriage, and now she's kept indoors. I mean, I'd say, it's not your everyday situation, but it can happen. I just think people need to not be afraid of speaking out and actually, picking up the phone, or whether it's going online to make a report to the local organization, or if it's calling Karma Nirvana themselves, to say, actually, whether it's somebody next door or whether it's their friend, maybe they haven't seen them since the summer holidays. It's better to be safe than sorry. Yeah, I just wish, and I just want there to be more people who are more alert and who actively do something. I guess, like the elderly, when they say check on your neighbours, and don't just look the other way. Don't ignore your surroundings. I say it's the same for the younger generation as well, and especially around the summer holidays. It's the worst.
Are you still shocked and surprised to see that even today there is no end to these cases?
I'm not. It saddens me, but I'm not surprised. I feel like the only way is probably going to change is, the next generation and the generation after, in future, for people to actually break free and not continue the abuse, because that's what it is. To not repeat these I'd like to say pattern, but I feel like it's not a strong enough word.
Cultural practices.
Yeah. Like, as a parent myself, I can't imagine anything worse than forcing, I feel like I struggle to say it, but it's like, I wouldn't force my child to do anything, you know. So I just feel like it's inconceivable to think, yeah, I
Probably lost for words there. So thank you once again, Fozia, for being on the podcast, for being such a wonderful guest and sharing your story. I know it hasn't been easy, so I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you.